I was ecstatic about my date that was coming up this evening with Nafisa. I was going so mental over it, I forgot completely about the charade with Lanisha Holloway. Lanisha was all talk. She was the kind of woman that wanted to make you believe she was something that she wasn't. She reminded me so much of Katharine Hepburn and my uncle's wife. I hated my uncle's wife, but you had to give her an Oscar for her stellar role she played in life. I knew from this point forward, if I was going to be successful at anything I did in life, I had to realize that women were downfalls. It was biblical since the beginning of creation. My pops used to say a lot of things about the female species. He had viewpoints on every other woman besides my mother. He once told me something that had dawned on me while I was peeking through Lanisha's window that night. Women outslick us by 10 barrels of oil any day. I never in a million years thought that anybody would get their pipe into my well before I brought the water up, but it happened. It made me wonder about Nafisa and if she was like that. I really just wondered how she was, period. I knew I didn't know a damn thing about her other than she liked gangster movies, so we did have that in common, but I wasn't really sure if I liked gangster movies. I knew I had a vision to create, and the movies I researched would serve their purpose. And if she enjoyed them, I would most definitely try to really enjoy them. I lied on my bed for a while. I didn't want to think about my plan at all. All I wanted to do was think about Justice Blaylock, King Justice, who was right here with me days ago. Now my pops is pushing up daisies and Willie D is controlling the set. If I didn't know better, I would have thought Willie D had something to do with the death of my pops, but I knew better. See, I really knew that Willie D was like a dog with no teeth, just had bark because his bite couldn't possibly hurt anyone. In other words, that nigga was a coward. This is why I never had to worry about him when I got ready to put my plan down. Little did he know he was going to be a part of my plan, whether he liked it or not. My pops was the man. I had also seen Mrs. Viola Brooks at the church. Nobody else saw her, but I saw her poke her head in, and she was waiting outside in her car for us to leave so she could run in and view my pop's body. Viola was an old-time hooker. I knew she messed around with my pops, but it had been some time ago, back when he had scored his first package, which was all weed, because cocaine just wasn't that public unless you were from Hollywood or a big-time athlete. The normal nigga wasn't getting any coke. Boy and girl were too risky for our blood, at least that's what somebody thought, but weed was our drug of choice anyway. My pops knew that he couldn't sit on those packages. He told me before he died that shelf life for a package means one or two things. The nigga pushing his product is too damn greedy, or his dumb ass can't count the ways to make paper. Flippin' kept the money coming in. He used to tell me more shit than I think he knew he was telling me, but I would suck it all up in hopes of gaining more knowledge and building my confidence up for what it was I wanted to do. He told me that Viola had all the connections to put a peon right in the game, but that was before I had known what a peon was. Justice told me that even though Mrs. Viola wanted to do the thing with him, he didn't want to do it. He said that he didn't sign up for that and that he was there to get the money. He also told me that once you create a situation, whether you tell the truth or not, you increase the chances for a predicament. So his main goal when it concerned his friend Viola Brooks was to keep it business. I got up to get myself prepared for the evening. I showered, greased, and brushed my hair until my waves were wavy enough to make a sailor seasick. I found a white polo shirt and a pair of new jeans. I was down to my last pair of Chucks and I threw them on. I looked at myself in the mirror one more time to make sure that it was all good. I could see that my mustache was starting to come in, and I began looking more and more like my pops every day. I put on some of the cologne my pops had left behind. It was called Jakar, and it smelled really good on me. I was set for my first real date. It was cool outside, so I put on my black leather bomber, removed the snub nose from under my pillow, and tucked it in my back waistline. I could hear my mother downstairs on the phone talking to one of her girlfriends. She had been getting a lot of phone calls from friends making sure that she was all right. Actually, I think she was getting sick of people calling all the time. She said the people were just being nosy and probably trying to find out if my pops had left her a nest egg behind. Everybody knew who my pops was and what he was doing. He was the man, and being the man was hard to cover up. I grabbed the keys and headed downstairs. My mother was sitting there at the kitchen table smoking a cigarette and having a shot of liquor. "Where you off to, young man, looking so dapper?" she asked as she looked me up and down like I had never dressed clean before. "I got a date with a nice girl." "Oh, a date? You remember what your mama said about these little Project Hussies, boy, and strap that brainless head up you swinging down there." "It isn't like that at all, Mama. She isn't from the projects, and I think we will just be going to the movies and having a soda afterward," I replied. "What?" My mom's voice raised up, and not in anger, but with an affectionate concern in it. That was the thing about mothers. They sent stuff way before you told it. "My son sounds like he's courting a girl. Let me call you back," she said into the receiver before she hung up the phone. "Come here and take a seat, Justice Jr." I walked over and sat down beside my mother, looking at her and drawing a memorable picture of how she looked from the stories my pops used to tell me about them when they were teenagers. I knew she was still just as beautiful now as she was then. Her hair was shorter because she didn't want to wear it long and take the time to manage the style, she would always say, and her complexion was smooth as olive oil. She could easily be mistaken for 18. I was worried that if she kept drinking that it would affect her beauty, but nothing affected her thus far. "I'm going to tell you something since you have love on the brain." I quickly tried to interrupt my mother when she used the word love, but she stopped me by raising her hand. "Manners, boy, now. Mama's talking. You can try and fool me if you like, but I've been there and done that, so I know. And one thing is for sure, you are truly your daddy's child. And I seen that look 15 years ago, so listen to what I have to say," she demanded. I wanted to reach over and pour myself a shot of whiskey. I needed something to warm the flow through my esophagus and warm my intestines listening to the birds and the bees from The Greatest Woman Ever. My mother told me the story of her and her mother. She told me about her sister and the rest of the family, my other aunts and female cousins, some that I had never wound up even knowing, but the moral of the whole story was the women who took after their mothers and lived life likewise were the ones who had successful lives, promising marriages, and raised great children. She explained that was why she always quoted my grandmother in situations. She told me that women who took after their mothers, if they came from a great household, would have principle and would most likely speak of something their mother had said, especially on the first date, to let a man know right away where they stood. I tried to tell my mother again that it was just a movie and a snack, but I knew I wanted more, and she knew I wanted more too. I didn't know what more I could have with Nafisa, with her being a few years older than me and going off to college the next semester, but what I did know is that I was planning on enjoying her company tonight. My mother looked at me and finished her shot. She waved me off with her hand and told me to have a good time. I kissed her on her cheek and assured her that I would. I walked outside and the sun was setting. The sky took a look that I would never forget. Its different rays of purple infatuated my mind beyond belief. I had never looked at the sky in such awe before. I pulled up to Nafisa's house. Her home was bigger than the Holloway's house and had more windows. I had almost started to blow the horn, but decided against it. There was an older lady sitting on the porch, rocking in a chair, crocheting something together, and I wondered if that was her grandmother or her mother. I approached the porch and spoke to the woman. She had on some store-bought eyeglasses and bent her head looking over the rims to greet me. "Hey, young fella, you must be here to pick up my Feezy B." "Yes, ma'am, I am," I replied. "Hope that's all right with you," I continued, trying to be as polite as I possibly could. "What might your name be?" the elder asked. "I'm Justice Blaylock." "You live in them projects over there, that Wiggins Village, huh?" "Yes, ma'am, been there all my life, but won't be for long once I finish school." The elder lady had gone back to crocheting after I made my last comment. I wasn't sure if I gave her the right answer or the wrong impression, but it was what was real. I wasn't going to be a liar. No situation meant no predicament. Nafisa came out of the house. My mouth almost hit the ground when she emerged through the screen door. She had on a pair of tight jeans that fit her like a jockey saddle on a prize-winning racehorse, and purple sweater that had a big collar around it, something like you see in Hollywood. Her hair wasn't in curls the way I remembered it, but she had straightened it out and it hung long and lay about 3 inches past her shoulders. Her skin was 100% satin and glowed vividly. The purple reflection from her sweater took me right back to the sunset that I had just witnessed. It was incredible. "So where you children off to?" the elder asked again, looking over the rim of her glasses. "We're going to a movie, Granny," Nafisa replied. My ears were hearing words, but my mind kept wondering what kind of music I was going to play in the car. Why did she have to look so beautiful? She knew she was going to make it hard for me. Was I going to get a kiss before the night ended? Right then and there, I knew my mother knew exactly what she was talking about. The drive took us about 10 minutes to get to the movie theater. We cruised along with people looking at us at every stoplight. I didn't know if they were looking at the car or if they were saying, "Look at the lovely young couple." But what I did know is that I felt good being next to Nafisa. She was such a royal duchess if there ever was one. I parked the car and opened the door for her just as I did when we left her house. I saw her granny watching and smiling. "You're quite the gentleman, Justice," Nafisa said. "You're quite the princess," I replied, watching her lips form the most gorgeous smile I had ever seen. We made it inside the movie theater right before it started to drizzle. Nafisa wasn't even worried about her hair getting wet like most women would have been. She was just anxious to get inside and see the movie. We stopped at the concession stand and got a big tub of popcorn with lots of butter and no salt. Nafisa said that salt wasn't good for a black man because it caused the blood pressure to rise, and we also ordered a big cherry Coke. When we made our way into the auditorium, the movie was just starting. I put the popcorn in Nafisa's lap and held the soda in my right hand, putting my left arm around her shoulder. She reached over and took a napkin and tucked it in my shirt like a hanky. "This is so that the butter doesn't drip on your nice shirt." My mother always said a woman should take part in keeping her man friend looking nice and neat. "Bingo, bingo, bingo." I looked up and said silently, "Thank you, Pops, for marrying such a great woman." I said it out loud, and Nafisa looked at me like I was crazy. I just looked at her and told her it was a long story and that I would explain it one day. We both sat quiet as Vito Corleone instructed his soldiers on what to do. Families were rising against families and showing disloyalty to one another and killing for power. Sonny was gaining power fast and becoming a hothead. Michael was the youngest, and something about his demeanor had told me that he would inherit the power, and that by the time the credits would roll, he would be walking in Vito's shoes. What I liked most is that Vito was level-headed. He understood his realm and what he wanted to do. Everybody else wanted a money revolution, one that would immensely take away the ground that was set. I looked at Nafisa and she had tears in her eyes. Sonny had just been gunned down at the causeway, making a run to go protect his sister from her abusive husband. I felt that he should have killed him the first time he beat her, but they had principles, and I believed that Sonny would have killed him if his sister wasn't having his baby. I shed a tear when Vito collapsed in the garden playing with his grandson. That was a sad moment to see a gangster go down, a true gangster with a true heart. I was learning from what I was seeing. I thought about Terrace and Odell, but more so about Terrace and what she had told me about learning to fight from watching the movie. Terrace was the only surviving student of Bruce Lee, and now I was the last standing member of the Corleone family. I had to go home and work on my plan. I had to put together my family and set up my territory. I was ready to become a godfather, not one of children, but the Don of my hood. We left the movie and the rain had become a little more heavy. Not pouring, but enough to get you soaked if you didn't reach your destination quickly enough to secure shelter. We got to the car and we were both a little wet. The front part of Nafisa's hair clung to her face, and it was beautiful. She smiled as I started the car to drive off. We stopped at a little adult club, and Nafisa said that we couldn't get in there because it was for grown folks. I didn't drink, and I knew she didn't, but my uncle's friend ran the place, and I knew he would let us slide in and sit in the back for a few minutes. We were in luck. He let us right in and ushered us to the back. He told us we picked a good night to come. There was live music, and when I asked him who it was, he told me it was a local boy who went by the name Jeffrey Osborne. He said the guy was a real crooner. I sat in the back with Nafisa. We shared a strawberry knee-high and a piece of cheesecake. We talked about the movie a lot and Michael Corleone. She insisted that the way it ended, they just had to bring out a part two. I asked her why did she think that, and she explained that Michael killed Mo Green for a reason, and that she thought there was unfinished business that his family had to attend in Las Vegas. You seem to know a lot, Nafisa, I said, pleased that she enjoyed the movie. Well, I studied history in school and also the Sicilian culture. I have an aunt who lives in Italy and is married to an Italian boxer, she confessed. I wonder if her uncle in Italy studied Rocky movies. If he didn't really know what kind of training he was missing out on. Wow, if it looks anything like where Michael Corleone was hiding, it has to be a beautiful place, I replied. I've seen pictures but never been there, and yes, it looks exactly like that. The house embedded in the mountains, clean fresh air, and just a wealth of natural beauty, Nafisa said, smiling and showing a love for wanting to see Italy personally. One day we will go there, I said, meaning every word that my tongue had just spoken. Stop being silly, Justice. We aren't going to Italy, Nafisa said, laughing, but not at me. Just smiling like she's understanding that I love things of beauty as she did, thinking I was just giving her some wishful thoughts to ponder, but I was dead serious. I didn't reiterate right after the time how serious I was, but we would go to Italy as sure as I would become a godfather or a don. We listened to the singer, and he was good. He was very soulful and pleasant to the ears. My uncle's friend came by our table and told us it was getting late, and that the police always made their rounds so we couldn't stay much longer. It was definitely getting late, and I wanted to get Nafisa home at a decent hour. I knew we could continue on the phone when I made it home. I thanked my uncle's friend and left a 10 on the table. He told me to tell my Uncle Larry to stop by the club and pay him a visit, and I told him that I would surely relay the message. We left and headed to the car. As we drove home, we talked some more about the movie. Nafisa said that she wished that Vito didn't die off in part one, but she understood that the son Michael had to prove that he could run the family, that he had to prove to his father that he could make good decisions on where to take the family business. She also said that she liked what he said to his wife. What was that? I asked. Well, at the time, the wedding bells hadn't rung, Nafisa said. No, I don't remember. What exactly did he say? I asked, not really sure what part she was talking about. I knew for sure that I would go back and see the movie alone. Then I could probably concentrate more on the motion picture instead of the emotions of the beautiful girl who sat next to me. He said that the family business would be completely legitimate in 5 years. Oh yeah, I remember that part. That was when she had first seen him before they were married, right? Yup, she was walking the school kids, Nafisa continued. One thing I'm going to ask you, Justice, is never to lie to me. Well, I'm not mafia yet, I said jokingly, but serious inside. But if you remember, Michael gave her one time to ask him about his business, and that's what she did. So you have one time to ask me about my business. Yeah, right, boy. He gave her one time, and when she asked, he still lied. We both laughed. Nafisa paid good attention to the movie. She had every detail down pat. I pulled in front of Nafisa's house and got out to open the door. The rain was coming down a little harder and now close to pouring. I didn't have an umbrella to shield her. When I opened the car door, she stood up and told me not to worry about the rain that was soaking us both from head to toe. Nafisa said her mother always told her that rain meant it was a sad day in heaven, that something gave the angels a reason to cry. Nafisa said that there was always something she wanted to do in the rain, and before I could ask her what it was that she wanted to do, she began kissing me. It was the freshest kiss that had ever been bestowed upon me, and then she ran off to go into the house. To purchase this and other books by this author, please visit Amazon.com.